Wednesday evening, everyone. You are watching Direct Line with our special guest this evening, Ella Ennis, MFRW Legislative Chairman for the Maryland Federation of Republican Women. Welcome, Ella. Ella is a constant watchdog of what crazy stuff is happening in Annapolis and beyond. Our hosts today are Mark Unkefer and Jackie Sexton. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Dwight. Ella, you should be a pro at this by now. You're back for round 2. We didn't scare you off.
Hello. I think we wanted to start. Are we ready to start talking about ranked choice voting?
Yes.
I'm sure you know there are 2 bills, both proposed by Montgomery County's delegations, and one of them is for Tacoma Park alone. It is House Bill 334, and it would allow the Tacoma Park to request to be a part of the state ballot so that their municipal election would appear alongside of all the county, state, and federal offices. And if they choose ranked choice voting, now it's my understanding that they do that in their local election anyways. But the problem here is that Tacoma Park allows non-citizens to vote in their elections. And that would give non-citizens access to the whole ballot. And it would probably require some kind of blending of the voter registration rolls, or else they couldn't check the people in. So in addition to being opposed to ranked choice voting, it would also, the Federation opposed this bill because it would allow non-citizens to have access to a state ballot. The other part of that bill that is that it would require all voting machines and software to accommodate ranked choice voting. So when these bills are billed as local bills, Montgomery County bills, they are setting the stage for it to affect the whole state. The other bill is House Bill 344, which was have the county council in Montgomery County be able to, by local law, enact ranked choice voting for all local races. So that would be your 9 council members and your executive, your state's attorney, the sheriff, everybody. And if you think about that, if you have 15 offices and you've got to choose 3 people for every office, that's 45 choices you've got to make while you're standing there before you ever even get to the ballot questions and any federal or state offices. So it would be confusing. It would be take a lot longer to vote. It will take a lot longer to count. People will not have the results of the election on an election night, and so therefore it causes voters to have concerns or misunderstandings of feeling that maybe the election's not fair or accurate. So we've opposed that bill. Now, part of this bill, when we look at the fiscal note on the bill, which you can look at online, the analyst has said there would this year, in their analysis of the bill versus last year, they're saying that it would only cost half as much to implement as they said last year. And one of the reasons they're saying it will cost less is because the independent software that you use to analyze the votes would have no cost. Now, if it has no cost to the state, you have to ask yourself who's paying for it. Is this some kind of software given to us by a Bill Gates Foundation or some other group that endorses ranked choice voting? So for all those reasons, we've opposed that bill and feel that that the best choice is having a direct vote between 2 people. If you feel you have to get to 50%, then have a runoff, have a special election to run off it. But obviously ranked choice voting is not in our best interest to increase the number of people turning out to vote. If you look at the State Board of Elections voter reports, their voter turnout reports for 2022 versus 2018, there's been a 10 to 15% drop off in the number of people turning out to vote. And that is in the 6 major counties. It's been 10 to 15% reduction in the number of people turning out. So clearly making lots of changes to the election process is not helpful.
There's actually interesting experience.
Yeah.
I know you and I have exchanged comment about this, where ranked choice voting in other jurisdictions has run into some problems where they basically began to do the calculation where they take the votes of people who were at the bottom and then reallocate them. And the boards of elections did it wrong because of the mechanics of how you handle, as I recall, it was how you handle people who didn't choose to pick people lower on. And as a result, after an election was held, it was necessary to go back and say, we gave you the wrong answer. We're going to have to give you the right answer. So it really is very questionable whether or not you can really have elections that are fair and honest of using ranked choice voting.
Well, the worst part of it is the person is making 3 choices without knowing who the top 2 candidates are for each round of voting. And the person who votes for the highest vote getter in the first round doesn't get a second vote. It's just the people who voted for the bottom round. Now, if you had a race with 6 candidates and 3 choices, that means you could make 3 choices and not get any of those votes counted because they were at the bottom. It's just not a fair or an accurate way of determining who should be an elected officials. We really need to think about you choose the person you think will do the best job, not just, we're going to make 3 choices because that's nice to do.
So has public comment started for this bill yet, or is that still upcoming?
I'm sorry, tell me one more time.
Has public comment for this bill started yet, or is that still upcoming?
I think the question is, has there been a hearing for the bill yet?
But I'm not clearly understanding what you're saying.
We typed it for you.
We'll go. Do we want to go to the next issue, which is?
Yeah, I think we should. I actually, Jackie, I think there has been a hearing because I did see testimony on this. So, but let's go on to the next bill.
on the House bills. Yes,
Yeah.
On both ranked choice voting, the bills were last week. We had 7 people came and testified in favor. There was only 1 person who opposed the bills.
Okay. So one of the other voting bills was one for nonpartisan elections. This would get rid of party label, as I recall. You want to address that?
House bill, which bill?
This was actually SB 132.
132. Okay. Yes, that bill is coming up for hearing on the 16th in the Senate, and it in the EEE committee. That bill was put in by Senator Jackson, and it would require all the local offices to be nonpartisan elections. Instead of having a representative Republican Party, a Democrat, an independent, a Green Party person, you would have people just run in a primary by alphabetical order. And obviously, we're opposed to that. We think that reduces the opportunities for people to have choices of candidates. If you have each party having a primary, and there's everybody who wants to run in that primary can do so, and then you have a candidate representing each party. And then if you have a nonpartisan person who wants to run, they do it by petition. So the voter, when they go to vote in the general election, has some choices. And it's much more, I think, much more upfront and much more open. So this is one of those things where it's not broke, so why do we want to try to fix it? It definitely is, in my opinion, is not a worthy bill.
And I guess the argument could be made as well that even if people were running without a label, as we saw locally with our Board of Education races this past cycle, people's political affiliations still come out in people's mailers. Did you know this person was a Trump supporter? Did you know this person votes Democrat 99% of the time? So those things do have a way of still coming out regardless of the labels.
Correct. Yes, you do find that. You will have a party and they will endorse a candidate or they'll support a candidate. And so I think that what happens when you have this nonpartisan, it sort of becomes like you have all these people that you really don't know because you can't put them in the category of being, okay, they're conservative or liberal or whatever. And when they run in a party primary, there's a chance for learning more about them and their views than you would have in a nonpartisan election.
So
Go ahead.
next up, we want to talk about the gas tax bill.
The which bill?
The
Gas.
gas tax. Do you have that bill number?
The glass tax.
Gas
The
tax.
gas tax.
Gas tax. Okay, I got it. I'm really sorry. I don't know why it is that I'm not hearing you well tonight. Yes, Delegate Matt Morgan has put in a bill to freeze the annual increase in the gas tax that happens based on the consumer price index for urban areas. And there's like 20 other Republicans who have joined that bill. And it's going to have a hearing next week. And I hope that a lot of people will send emails to the Ways and Means Committee and endorse this bill, because I think that it will help, but it'll help the consumer. We've all been hit with this high price of gas of over $3 and $4 for the last 2 years, and it seems to me that it's fair to freeze it. And we do have to pay for roads, and we do have to pay for the cost of bridges, but this escalating cost every time is really hurting families who have modest means. So yes, that is a good bill, and we're hoping that it has a chance of passing. But I think it needs a lot of strong support by voters if we want it to pass.
So where can people send in their written testimony in support of the bill?
The other bills that deal with the bill number on the repeal of the gas tax increases, House Bill 422 and Senate Bill 261, and the hearing is 214. Now, I know that Mark Unicapter did an article on House Bill 75, which also deals with transportation costs and tolls. And it's really interesting that bill is not titled to make you understand that there's going to really deal with the tolls. It tells you there's going to be a railroad transportation commission. And it's only when you get down into the inside that you see that they've just adapted that from the Department of Transportation having tolls to pay for the loans on bridges. And so it would allow them to maximize the toll, which means that all tolls will go back up again after Governor Hogan, of course, had helped to lower them or to do away with them. So I think that we hope that bill's not going to go anywhere, but or at least that they won't be able to have that part to maximize tolls. There's also some bills that deal with clean cars and the California energy standards, and I think that those that we have House Bill 487 by Delegate Buckle and all the Republicans, which would require, before they could adopt these clean car standards from California, they would have to do an analysis and to show that in that analysis, they would have to show that the transmission lines, transmission system for electricity here could accommodate the huge increase of electric power needed to run all electric vehicles, that we could do that safely. And if you think about this with dealing with California, is they've had massive wildfires that took place because their electric transmission system wasn't up to date and not safe. It also said that they had to have there are some other parts to that bill as well. That they have to do an analysis that the electric vehicles could be affordable, and of the impact on the roads, as well as being able to show that our electric transmission system could handle it. So this is a really common sense bill to say, before we go adopt the standards for all electric vehicles, that we know that we can accommodate it. And on the other side, you have Delegate Love, who's put in a bill, H230, that would require Maryland to incorporate the Clean Cars analysis bill, the Clean Car bill, by reference. So we would have to accept everything that California does, whether or not it makes sense for Maryland. So hopefully that bill will not pass.
I was going to ask a question. One of the proposals is to allow the counties to increase their piggyback tax. That is the extra tax that comes on top of the state tax that counties collect.
Right. I think that's called the common sense tax bill that's been put in. What it says is that if a county, if a county wants to raise its income tax rate, it has to do that on the higher income tax rate and lower it on the lower income people. That is a bill that would require, I think it only affects, it's called more local tax and income tax relief. And it says that you could raise the top rate from 3.2% to 3.7%, or that's the piggyback tax that comes on top of your income tax. And that you would have to lower the lowest bracket, so that people with an income that was lower would not have to pay it. So you based it on individuals with Maryland taxable income in excess of 2 times the maximum state bracket, which is people with $500,000 of income. You could charge them 3.7%. But for people at the lower end, you would have to have it at 2.25%. Now, most counties have it at 2.25% is their rate right now. That's all they can charge. So it would allow a county to decide to tax its highest income wage earners at a higher rate, as long as they lowered the lower one.
So
and that bill had a hearing today.
Let's move on to talk about the big bill that had their hearing yesterday, which was the 2A bill about concealed carry.
I'm sorry.
Let's talk about the wear and carry bill that there was a hearing on yesterday.
The
Senate bill on the Second Amendment. Is that what we're talking about?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I can tell you that I know there were a lot of people down there for all the gun bills. The Senate Bill 1 would basically say you can't take a firearm outside your house. And if you think about this, the people who apply for and get a carry permit are law-abiding citizens. They're not very likely to be the person who's going to go out and commit a crime with a gun. It is the person who is illegally obtaining a gun and using it to commit crimes. So why would we want to have a bill that says that no one can carry a gun outside their home. We understand that crime has increased, and what we need to do is address that crime, not take away a Second Amendment right that's guaranteed to us by our U.S. Constitution and take that away from the law-abiding people. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Absolutely. And today we heard Democrats testifying that this bill, the way it's written, is completely unconstitutional and would be overturned in court should it get passed.
Right. The thing is, I think we got to realize that if this ends up in court, I would think that it would be unconstitutional. I mean, I'm not certainly not an expert. I'm just talking as a ordinary citizen. But as you just can't imagine that it should be this restricted. It just seems like it's trying to punish law-abiding people, even if that's not what their intention was.
So while we look into the other bills we want to talk about, I did want to put in our plug, as we are having Ella on to help promote the Maryland Federation of Republican Women, and more specifically, the Maryland Republican Women Empowered, which is the virtual club geared towards your working women. And Dwight will throw up the lower third for that. So if you are interested in getting involved with us, you can join now on Anadot. It is $35 for the year. And we have a lot of really exciting events coming up, including a speaker at the end of February, Donna Jackson from Project 21. So with that being said, while Dwight finds that graphic, let's move on to our next bill. What we got, Mark?
I was going to raise appropriately a number of the gender bills. The gender, I caught a cluster. There's a whole bunch of them, but they're basically gender identification bills.
Okay, there are there's a large number of bills that come under these issues. So if I start by saying there is this, there's the bill on girls' sports that deals with the gender issue, and that is what Delegate Salega has put in. 32 Republicans are sponsoring the women's Save the Women's Sports Act, and that bill will say that you can have sport team in high school, a junior high school, that you will either have girls and women's teams, boys and men's teams, or a co-ed team, but that girls sports will be for biological girls, and that the girls who compete in high school competitive sports, if they are subject to an adverse action either by a sports authority or like if a credentialing organization where you are competing for girls sports, that they would have a right to file a civil action against that. And I think this is very needed. I mean, you think we all have been aware of some of the college teams, girls teams, where men who have identified as females are winning all the prizes and the scholarships. And the whole point between Title IX way back there in the 1970s was to give girls an opportunity to compete the same as boys for college scholarships and for competitions. And this bill would help to preserve that, because there are cases of where we have and it's not that you don't want this other person to compete, but there needs to be a separate category for them rather than having them compete against girls.
So the Shalega bill.
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so the Shalega bill allows for co-ed teams to compete. It just allows for women and girls teams and boys and men's teams to be separate, and then creates a third potential category.
And then and then there's the third category of co-educational team, which would handle a male identifying as female or female identifying as a male. They can be in a co-ed team. And so everybody would be allowed to compete, but they would be separate. Now,
sure.
I think one of the bills that you may be thinking about is there's a bill to require unisex signs on restrooms in public buildings. And I don't think that's a big deal. Where you have a sign that anybody, this is for a private restroom where there's only one place and you'll go in and lock the door. You would have some kind of neutral signs that they're going to have.
So what about the bill for prisons with regard to transgender inmates?
Why wouldn't we have some transgender women or girls with?
No. So what about the bill about the prisons and for people to be able to choose which prison they want to go to based off of their gender identity?
Are we talking about the one for in prisons where there's? Okay, so the bill this year is a little softer than the one last year, but it basically says that a transgender female would be that all prisoners would be asked in a private setting what their preference was for their sexual identity and their names and their pronouns, and that if a person said they were a female and they would be assigned to the prison lodging cells, where residential cells, they would be able to choose whether they wanted to have a single cell or to have a roommate or cellmate. But it doesn't tell you that the biological female would be able to choose not to have be in the same cell with them. So to me, it's still wrong. What you need to have is females need to be protected, whether they're in prison or whether they need to be able to be in a single sex residential area, and that those who are identifying as a female but they're physically a male need to be in a separate cell area. It's not logical, and it's not safe to make a biological female be in a place where their privacy is totally eliminated, and they have to shower and sleep in the same room with somebody who is biologically a male with no choice.
So I think, Mark, next we want to talk about, I would say, the other hot issue, which would be about the health framework in schools and what they're teaching the students.
Yes, good idea. So let's talk about education.
Okay. The Primary and Secondary Educational Act. Wait a minute, I'm looking for it. 19. Yes. So this deals with the Comprehensive Health Education Framework, House Bills 119, 199, and is very comprehensive. If you go to the State Board of Education's website and in Comprehensive Health Education Framework, it will take you to a 78 or 80 page document, and it's done in a form, and it goes from pre-kindergarten through high school, and it's but they have both a mental and a family life and human sexuality standard in this framework. And what the bill 119 and 199 does, take this out of a regulatory situation and puts it into statute, and it would require that when this framework is updated, that if every school district, every school would have to adopt a curriculum that fit into this standard. So some of the things that we found to be troubling about this bill and about this framework that has already been developed by the State Board of Election, by State Board of Education, is they start with families, and they start this in pre-kindergarten, and they ask you about, they talk about what a family is, and they say it's a group of people that supports one another. Well, I think a family is really more than that. And it says, when it talks about types of family, it identifies them as single parent, same gender family, intergenerational family, cohabitating families, adoptive families. This is in kindergarten and first grade. Nowhere to talk about married to parent.
I think we just lost Jack.
Yeah, it looks like she went quiet on her
And
volume.
she, for some reason, she's talking, but I think there's something wrong with her microphone.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So we'll give Ella a second to try and get her mic working again. But to continue on what she's saying, there is a copy of the framework online that people can look at. But essentially, as Ella was saying, is starting out already with introducing different family types, but in no way does it mention marriage or, you know, the traditional family structure that we've heard of. And as you can imagine, if that's where it's starting at with pre-K, when you get to the point that you're in middle school, they're talking about anal sex. They're talking about, you know, really things that, if I may say, are not appropriate for elementary school and middle school age children. And something that I've talked about, and Mark, feel free to comment on this, but when I've talked about with my own friends, with regards to these types of bills, not just in Maryland, but all over the state and all over the country, is that nobody ever taught this to me. Nobody ever taught this to any of my friends in my generation. And I would say that we've all grown up to be perfectly accepting of, you know, homosexuality, of people with different backgrounds. You know, none of us are out there committing hate crimes, and nobody ever explicitly taught us these things in school. So I do think that this, in my personal opinion, is something that can be taught at home, can be taught just by going out into the world, and doesn't necessarily need to be something that's, you know, force fed to students in school, especially at a young age.
I think though we probably we've lost Ella, who is our how shall I say our star attraction here. We will be having her on in the end, actually the beginning of March. And that's when, frankly, the legislature gets early. Sometimes in the early days, there's a lot of bills that get thrown out that March 8th is. Perfect. You're back. Great.
Can you hear us, Ella?
So why don't we, one of the next bills we were going to talk about was bills about aliens license access to occupational licenses.
Ella, can you hear us?
There is bill with nurses and health care non-citizens to become to get a license if they meet the technical qualifications and social security number, which means they are not legally here. They can use a tax ID number instead and registered. And I think that, you know, an indication that we have coming into Maryland, our area, who are not here legally and who are looking to take over jobs that are belong to Americans. And so,
yeah, and definitely we're seeing, you know, in Maryland and all over the country, on the news every single day, the border crisis. And it's not just a matter of having migrants that we don't have the capacity to house, to take care of, nor should it be our responsibility to do so. But they're also bringing with them a lot of dangerous drugs, fentanyl being the most deadly at the moment. And I think that this is indicative of a lot bigger crisis, that instead of saying, let's fix the border problem, we're trying to accommodate them. I think Ella's internet is going in and out again. But a couple of other bills that we want to touch on in our last 10 minutes here.
I'll kind of throw up an open-ended question to Ella. Is there another bill that we have not talked? We've really gone through the waterfront, but there are obviously a lot more bills that are in the hopper. Are there other bills that we should be paying attention to?
Um, there are many others that I haven't really thought about bringing up tonight. One of them that was last year was this student peaceful demonstration bill, and
Right.
it is this year House Bill 568. And it would say that students could go to their school and say, we want to have a peaceful demonstration. And they would do this during class time. So here we have 40% of our students can't read on grade level, can't perform math on grade level, and we're going to take time out of their day for classes and have students put together a political demonstration and do it on the school, in the school time, on the school grounds. What's even worse is this bill provides that they can have a student-led demonstration on a school bus. Now, that's where you would say, is this really safe? From the standpoint of all the students to have a demonstration going on the school bus. And I think it's really poor judgment to say that you should have this going on student-led demonstrations during class time or on a school bus. And if there's plenty of time outside of class time for students to demonstrate if they have an issue that they are keen on. So this is, again, it just seems like there's so many of these bills that are having young people become activists rather than become educated. And we really need to focus on every student being able to read on grade level, do math on grade level, and hopefully write a paragraph that is coherent and concise. So without that, everything else, it seems to me, should stand aside. And you almost ask yourself, why aren't school boards saying this is an emergency? We need to have extra effort to make sure that no child is left behind, that every child reads on grade level, math on grade level. So this bill ought to stay in committee.
Yeah, I can't imagine many parents are happy about tax dollars that go towards education being completely wasted because their students are out protesting when they're supposed to be learning.
Yes, it does. You know, it's unbelievable. The other bill we didn't talk about is the end of life bill that deals with assisted suicide. It's just been introduced. It is not yet in print, so we don't have the details, but I understand that it's like the bill they had in 2019, and that it basically says if a person has an illness that they term is terminal illness, meaning that they might likely die in 6 months, that they would be able to ask for a prescription to end their life. Now, this sounds compassionate, perhaps, but you realize that somebody who is elderly or disabled or ill could be pushed or coerced into agreeing to do this. And if we look at Canada, they have their assisted suicide bill has moved to the point that people who are poor or who can't afford all of their food or housing are being given pills to kill themselves. I mean, goes way beyond anything we would have imagined. And it just shows you that it's a very slippery slope. That we really need to look at better ways of helping people manage their pain and deal with their economic issues when they have a terminal illness. The other one I don't think we mentioned was that at the same time they've introduced Senate Bill 798, which is a constitutional amendment on reproductive freedom.
Right.
And that it says everybody's entitled to a fundamental right of reproductive freedom, which includes the right to make and effectuate decisions regarding an individual's own reproduction. So this goes way beyond the issue of Roe v. Wade and the right to abortion, but it could also come into the right of minors to change their bodies by surgery to transform them from one sex to the other as reproductive freedom, while it really takes away their ability to ever reproduce. And it also opens the gate for when a baby is born or before it's born, that a person can decide that through lack of action, that baby could die. That was a bill last year, House Bill 626, and it didn't pass. It didn't get out of committee. But by this constitutional amendment could allow that, allow a person who had a child to just simply not provide food, water, warmth, their care, and if it died within this perinatal period, 28 days after birth, they would not be responsible and could not be investigated or prosecuted.
That's absolutely horrifying.
I mean,
I recall
really,
that.
So this bill, the constitutional, in the word for this year's bill, but we think it's going to be similar to the one last year. We should know within a couple days.
Definitely something worth testifying against if ever I've heard one. And we did list a lot of bills worth testifying against tonight.
So we will have the opportunity coming up in March. And the way the legislature works is there comes a date, a crossover date, where if bills haven't been considered on both, basically haven't been taken up in one house, that they basically get withdrawn from consideration. And that gives us a better idea of the bills that are the most serious, right? So coming in March 8th, I think was the date, we'll have you back on and have about March 8th, I think I should say. We'll look forward to having you back on as a preview, as we, at that point, will be going into the final month of the legislative session.
Right. Okay, thank you. And thank you for your patience with me.
Thank you very much, Ella. It's a pleasure to have you.
Sharing your wisdom with us, Ella. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We will be back next week. But if you're looking for more fun with us, join us at the Mama Lucia in Olney, Maryland, tomorrow night at 6:30 for Pizza and Politics with our special guest, Larry O'Connor. That is going to be a great time. I know I'm looking forward to it. And again, if you're interested in getting involved with Maryland Republican Women Empowered, reach out to us. We have the link to join. And we look forward to getting to know you and seeing you at one of our events. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.